Chapter 67. The Power of Hereditary Influence. The Lord. But, it will be asked, how can such be passed on? Oh, quite easily, particularly within the organic soul structure. Whatever the latter once has accepted can remain with her for thousands of years, if this is not brought back to order within her by the Spirit. Think of the archetype of a society. If I introduce you to its progenitor, then you shall all see that a substantial resemblance has passed over to all his offspring. If the progenitor was good and gentle man, and his wife as well, then with few exceptions the nation shall be better and more gentle than a people with a raging, haughty and domineering progenitor. If a primordial progenitor's feeble trait is still discernible in his descendants physically and morally after a couple of thousand years, how much more the character trait of the first man of the earth in all his descendants, in that his soul in the beginning was much more receptive and hence far more irritable than the later souls, in whom the father's hereditary influence had impregnated them already at procreation in the life-stream seed, and hence could not subsequently in the natural process be wiped away and annihilated. Unfortunately, such scar greatly disfigures such soul, and God has in all times done everything to make it possible for such soul to rid itself of such scar for all times. However, until now, not much success could be achieved, and I came to this earth myself in order to extirpate such old and ugly scar. And I shall do so indeed. But this shall be accomplished through the many wounds inflicted upon my flesh. But at this stage you cannot grasp this. But you shall be able to grasp it when it has come to pass. And the Holy Spirit of all truth shall then lead out into all wisdom about it. But you have read in the book of Moses, where he speaks of Jehovah's curse over the earth, where it says, "In the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat bread." And soon after curse of the earth it says, "Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee." Behold, if you were to take this materially, that is, if this earnestly were to be so physically, then you would be fully entitled to reproach God for a complete lack of wisdom. But since such a statement can be taken only psychologically, and actually spiritually, such reproach falls by the wayside, and man can blame only himself if something in his nature deteriorates, just as he can blame only himself if on some land the harvest is sometimes worse than normal. Because not everything about the weather depends upon God's will, but also upon man. Once a soul is fully conscious and achieves sufficient sensibility to well recognize God's order, then, for it has to become active, in accordance, of course, with the recognized divine order within her. If in some aspect she does not do so, or omits it, or even does the contrary, then she obviously is bound to cause herself irreparable harm, from which she shall not be able to free herself on her own accord, since all her action is more or less disorderly. With further consequent soul restrictions in time, such as all kinds of blindness, foolishness, incomprehension, feeble perception, fear, lack of courage, sadness, frustration, annoyance, rage, anger, and ultimately despair itself. And behold, these are the thorns and thistles, which the soil within the soul, that is, the depleted intelligence attributes, shall cause to grow within her, akin to the parasitic growths upon otherwise healthy tree branches. God's curse, however, is nothing other than the soul's realization of her own self-destruction in light of God's perceived order, having to, as a consequence of her own blame, eat bread by the sweat of her brow. And the sweat of her brow is the aforementioned world-trouble scar that she herself incurred through eating of the Mosaic apple, which she could have easily avoided